Hello and welcome to Brilliant But Lazy. I'm Alan.
I'm Josh. Welcome back, buddy. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. We are the pop culture branch of Victims and Villains. We talk about all things nerd, centric, Marvel, DC. Today we're going to be talking about DC with the sequel to Joker Folie, which is French for something. I'm not sure what. But yeah, it's been a minute. We haven't done an episode since Deadpool. Josh, how are you?
Good, man. Busy. I was trying to get a new book done in time for New York Comic Con. I'm like 10 chapters in and 40,000 words in, and it's not going to get done in time for New York, but we're going to do some fun pre-sale things there, and I'm going to get it done in time for the holidays. And yeah, I've just been kind of getting that ready, getting New York Comic Con stuff ready, and there's been some movies out, so that's really my only break. I haven't been gaming as much lately, but I have been checking out some movies. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. The last three movies I've seen in theaters have been DC related.
Oh, really?
Because not only did I just saw Joker, but before that, for Batman Day, they re-released Batman with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson and Batman Forever. So I went to see those when I had the day off. I was like, those are my Batman movies. I have to go see those. They had Mask of the Phantasm too, but I had just watched that. So I was like, two movies back to back in the theater is enough for me for today. So, but yeah,
I felt so embarrassed. I felt like someone should take my Batman card for me not being a part of that. Because I saw the fun popcorn, buckets. There was like a Joker one and a Batman Bat Signal one, and didn't get any of those. I was disappointed in myself.
I went to the theater when they released those. When they re-released the Batman in early September. I went to the theater specifically to see if they had the popcorn bucket, and I looked at it and I was like, I want it. I don't need it, but I can justify getting the Batmobile cups. And I should have had one with me. I bought two of them, one for here and one for my place and one for at work. But the cups are really cool because it has like every cinematic Batmobile, and it does like the holographic thing.
Neat.
Yeah. But
I didn't see those, but I have been seeing a lot of horror movies lately. I saw The Substance, and that was like the last recent one. And I not to tease what I think of the Joker too, but. Kind of continues with that horror vibe for sure.
Yeah. I'm not a big horror guy, so this is not the best time of year for me for movies, but hey, if they're going to release superhero movies in October, I'm here for it. Mostly because of the podcast.
But before we talk about Joker Part 2, there's some other Batman stuff, going on right now on Max with the Penguin.
Yeah. Have you been watching Penguin as it releases?
Yeah. I mean, not night of, just because like the first couple weeks, I thought it was coming out on like a Thursday, but it's a Sunday night thing, right? It's like Game of Thrones, so
yeah.
I'll watch it tomorrow. But yeah, I've watched the first two so far, so I'm up to date.
I'm enjoying it. It doesn't need I don't feel like we'll probably get into it when we do a full review of the first season or the series, whatever. I don't know if it's a limited series or what their plan is, but once the season's over, we'll do a full episode on it. But I'm enjoying it. Colin Farrell is one of my favorite parts of the Batman.
Sure.
It doesn't feel like it needs to be in that universe to be an interesting show, which I think is beneficial. Because it doesn't, you don't need to be like name dropping the Batman or Jim Gordon or any of that stuff. Like it works.
It's not forcing that connective tissue.
Exactly. Yeah. The story works on its own, which I think is helpful.
It's not doing that old, if this show had came out on like the CW like 10, 15 years ago, when the Penguin walks across the street, the camera would hang and you'd see like Batman in the distance in the sky or something lame like that. But it started with like a little recap of the Batman movie and then just dropped right in. And you could tell the cinematography is different and that it's a made for TV show
Hmm.
versus a movie, but it still looks pretty good. And Colin Farrell is still acting his ass off, and
Oh yeah.
um, everybody introduced so far is fun to watch in terms of the mob and the mafia and stuff like that. So I'm enjoying it. I'm intrigued by it so far.
I am too. Like, I'm very curious to see where they go. I think Sophia Falcone is one of the best parts of the show, so I'm really interested to see where they go with her character.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
What's his name from bald guy who's just always you know what I'm talking about? He's
Yeah.
in House of Cards, and
Hmm.
he's just always a slimy dude. But his character's great. I love him in the show. I love everybody in the show. So I mean, it's very well cast so far.
Yeah.
There hasn't been anybody. I see that they've switched out the actor for Carmine. It looks like Mark Strong is in
Yeah.
it now. And I saw him in a trailer, and so I'm guessing there's gonna be a flashback scene or something. But otherwise, yeah, I love everybody that's a part of it. So Clancy Brown's in it, and he's always
Oh yeah.
fun to watch on screen. So yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more about things coming up on the show here at the end, but let's get into today's main topic. 'Cause I feel like we both really want to talk about this movie. Joker Folie à Deux, Joker 2, starring Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga, directed by Todd Phillips. This is the sequel to the 2019 Joker film starring Joaquin Phoenix. I don't think we did an episode on that Joker because that was before.
Yeah, I was
joined
wondering
Victims.
how you felt on
I
that. Yeah.
I enjoy. It's one of those films where I saw it in theaters and I was like, I don't think I ever need to watch this again. And then I ended up. I think the first podcast I did with Victims and Villains was a live Comic-Con podcast where we talked about Joker. And I was like, the only thing, the scene that sticks with me the most out of that whole thing is the talk show scene at the end. Like, that's the one that was ripped straight from the comic books, right from the Dark Knight Returns, and like, I really enjoyed the tension building of that scene.
Yeah.
The music was good. The performance was fine. It's just one of those films where I was like, I don't need, like, there's no joy in this for me. Like, it's such a painful film to watch. And I was like, when they announced they were doing a sequel, I was like, okay, I guess. But the first one is one that I did not like. I enjoyed it. I think it's very well done cinematically, and the camera work's great. Music's great. Artistically, it's a great film. It's just not. I'll get into my problems with that film when we talk about this one, then, because a lot of the same things that I can say about that film, I can say about this one. So,
Yeah. Well, as you can tell, I'm a pretty big Batman fan and comic fan, and not all of those stories on that wall are canon. One of the Elseworlds um, is a easy way to tell stories that aren't canon, that don't have to hold to anything like that, and you can just be creative with it. And I remember initially hoping that the Joker was going to be more canon related and was going to be super violent and everything. I remember telling Seth, like, in that trailer when it shows him walking out of the elevator, I'm like, what if he's actually holding like a machete and they're just like cropping that out of the picture? And he wasn't, and I think like we saw it opening night in New York, and I remember things were tense. Like, people were like, "This could get violent," and it didn't. But it was during Comic-Con, so there were people dressed up, and you couldn't have face paint on and stuff like that. If you did, you had to go wash it off. And I enjoyed the movie for what it was. Once I realized what they were going for more of an Elseworlds thing. Sure, it changed some things, introduced some things, but that's the point of an Elseworld story. You can mix things up, and I thought it was well acted, well shot. It was just constant building of tension. They definitely kind of made him more to be. I don't know if anti-hero is the best, but it was it was the man versus the establishment type thing, and it wasn't necessarily as jarring as making Venom a good guy, but it was kind of like, the 99% versus the 1% type thing. And I remember people blowing that out of context and saying this is an anthem for all the uh oh gosh, what's the word? Incels out
Yeah.
there, and there was this whole thing about, oh, this movie is for the toxic men out there. And I saw a lot of people, and now a lot of people regurgitating that stuff about how the first movie made Joker out to be a protagonist, and I just never saw it that way. I mean, it wasn't the same Joker from the comics, but it wasn't. I still didn't view him as a protagonist. Like, he went through a lot of shit, which made his backstory a little more interesting, and that's also different from the comics because you never really knew his backstory. And so once I realized they weren't trying to tell an origin story for the Joker, they were just trying to tell their own story, I was intrigued. But I didn't think he was any more protagonist than Hannibal Lecter was in Silence of the Lambs. There was another villain in Silence of the Lambs, and spoiler alert, Hannibal Lecter gets away at the end. But that doesn't mean that you think he's a good guy. You're kind of rooting for him to get away, and the more the series goes on, you do kind of like to follow what happens with Hannibal. That doesn't necessarily mean you're rooting for him or you think he's a good guy. And so I never really understood people that were like, the Joker's a dangerous film because it gets people to root for the Joker. I just thought it was always an interesting thing. But I do remember Todd Phillips and a lot of people around that movie saying this is a one and done movie, and no, we're not planning a sequel.
Yeah.
And then it crossed $1 billion and somebody started writing checks, and I guess they decided to go back to the drawing room. Whether or not that was a good idea, that's what we're here to.
I get the feeling this was a idea that came up during COVID when everyone was locked down. Like Todd Phillips, like, hey, I have an idea for a story. Let's just write it out and see what happens. And then they're like, hey, let's Lady Gaga's on board. Let's do it.
Okay.
So, I saw this opening night. Wrapped up my other podcast, ran out of the door and ran to the theater to see this. The theater wasn't super packed. It usually isn't on opening nights anymore. But there was a handful of...
Unless it's Long Legs with
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage. That movie was packed. I don't know why.
Quick side note on Long Legs. Ryan talked about that on the podcast this week for We Watched This, and then I said something. Yeah, I'm interested to see that because of Nicolas Cage, and he just looks at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, Nicolas Cage is the guy in the makeup. He's like, I had no idea. I have so much more respect for Nicolas Cage now.
Oh wow, wow! All right, you got somebody.
But I went opening night. The theater wasn't super packed. And I got my popcorn. I wasn't a fan. There's things that I do like about this movie. Like, there are things I like about the first one, but there's a lot that this movie has going against it for me that I was not a fan of the final product overall. What did you think of Joker 2?
I ended up seeing it last night. I totally did not hear about the fan first screening. I usually try to hit those. And then Thursday night, I saw Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse live in concert. So I did not have the energy to go see a movie after that. So I saw it last night. And for opening night on a Friday, the theater was not packed. I've heard a lot of talk about this movie. I've tried to avoid all the reviews that have been dropping this week because I wanted to go in cold. I saw the one trailer and that was it. I knew it was going to be a musical. I knew that Todd Phillips was already trying to play defense on that, and that I think the quote was, "It's not a musical. They just sometimes sing songs." And I'm like, that's what a musical is. I don't know how else you define a musical. But I was like, it's the Joker. he's crazy. Sure, he sings a song in the last scene of the Joker, so it's not unheard of.
Yeah.
Let's just do this. Let's just do this. I'm a fan of Lady Gaga. I don't think everything she's done has been fantastic, but let's do it. Also, I like courtroom dramas. My favorite exorcism movie is The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and it's a courtroom drama, and I love that movie. I love courtroom dramas. So I was like, courtroom drama with the Joker plus other stuff. Let's do it. But I will say, seeing that trailer, I had the sneaky suspicion that it was not going to be what anybody was hoping it would be. The line in the trailer that says, "Let's get the people what they want." As soon as I heard that line, I'm like, they're not going to give the people what they want.
Yeah.
And then with the one scene in the trailer where there's an explosion, I'm like, that's probably going to be the only explosion in the whole movie. And I was sadly disappointed. Not in my predictions, but just that my predictions were more right than I wanted them to be. Um, yeah, I did not care for this movie. I just did not care. It's not that I didn't get it. I see Twitter on fire with, "Oh, bro, if you didn't like this movie, you just didn't get it. It's about mental health. It's about Arthur Fleck, and it's about this and it's about that." Okay, or it took risks, and how dare you hating something for taking risks? Well, props to them for taking risks, but just because they try to make something that's different doesn't mean it's good. And I thought that besides a lot of the stuff that happened in the movie, I thought that the structure of the movie wasn't all there. I thought that there wasn't a strong foundation. There wasn't a solid story, like with story arcs.
Mm-hmm.
And and I just we without getting into spoilers, the one of the main things that I thought was just odd is that we were just dropped in to 2 years later. And I almost felt like this could have been a third movie in a trilogy, and I was like, "Where's the second movie?" Because the first one ended on such a strong point. The first one had Arthur Fleck kind of having his very late and delayed coming of age story and finding his confidence and finding this revolution building around him. And even though you do see him in corrections at the end, he seems happy, he seems confident, and he's got the world on his back or behind him, and he's he's all about it. And then you see him in this one, and he's down in the dirt and next to death and uber depressed, and I'm like, wait, how did we get from that movie to this movie? And it never fills that in. And I was just like, I felt like there's a whole 2 years, which there's 2 years in the plot, but I feel like there's a whole 2 year film that we missed.
Yeah.
And so I immediately was kind of like, whether we waited this long to see this movie or this was the second episode in a series, it was jarring to me. And it had some cool musical numbers and some fun cinematography that I did like.
Mm-hmm.
But I just didn't think the story was there.
I think you and I are on the exact same page, because the story's not there for me. The cinematography is great. The soundtrack's good. I enjoyed the musical numbers for the most part. But yeah, the story just fell flat for me. I do have a theory on why he's so different in the beginning of this than he was at the end of the first film, which we'll get into in spoilers. But yeah, it just, my biggest, I'm fine with an Elseworlds story. As long as it's entertaining. And I did not like, as much as I enjoyed some of the musical sequences, like after a while, even they started to feel a little bit jarring. I was like, this isn't entertaining. The most entertaining thing of this whole thing was the opening sequence with the Looney Tunes bit.
Music did get distracting at times.
Yeah.
Like it was distracting you from the lack of story.
Yeah. And like, I know Joaquin Phoenix can sing. I saw Walk the Line in 2005.
Right.
It's putting him next to Gaga didn't seem fair to him in this, because he, like, Arthur Fleck is not Johnny Cash. Um, but I think Lady Gaga does a great job with the performances. I think one of the best things to come out of this is her Harley Quinn album that she released in alongside the film, which is her doing.
She did.
Yeah, it's like her just doing a lot of the songs from the film on her own as like standards, which Lady Gaga is good at singing standards. But yeah, the best way I've heard this film described, because I try to avoid spoilers, but the one I saw that was like, oh, that kind of makes sense, is this is more of an epilogue to the first film than a sequel.
Yeah, but it's a jarring, like, I feel like it was written in response to some of the response to the first one.
Yeah.
And I think purposely, and I really did not care for that. Like, Todd Phillips came out with something that at the time was the biggest or most profitable R-rated movie of all time. Of course, there were some detractors that said this is dangerous, and there was a lot of people up front that said we should not be, there's gonna be attacks in the theaters, and this is gonna encourage violence. It never did, and that quickly blew over. And then this movie was celebrated, and it was a good film for as different as it was. And then again, without getting into spoilers, this is just like a hard swerve in the opposite direction, story-wise and character-wise, and I feel like it was specifically written that way because of what some people said about the first film.
Yeah.
And that is heartbreaking to me, because I do not feel like this is a sequel. I feel like this is an Elseworlds sequel to the story. Like, it doesn't even feel at times like it's the same character. And again, if it is the same character, we don't see how he gets to this point, and so it's just not as satisfying. The first movie is all rise, this film was all fall, and you didn't really get him at his peak. And whatever form that would have been in, I don't feel like we got that. And I mean, not to keep on bringing up Hannibal Lecter, but it would be like if somebody made just a Hannibal Lecter film, and he only kills a couple people in the first film, and then the second film, he's so depressed that he killed a couple people, and then that's the end. And it's like, well, this isn't Hannibal Lecter, and likewise, this isn't Joker.
Yeah. Let's get into spoilers. Before we do that, we like to rate things on the show, brilliant or lazy. You want to go ahead and give this your rating?
Yeah. Cinematography wise, beautiful. But as an overall movie, especially in comparison to the first one, this was lazy.
Yeah.
And sadly, very lazy.
Yeah. Filmmaking wise, there's a lot. It's a beautiful film. Looks great, sounds great, but the story is just not there for me. I'm also going lazy. So on that note, we are going to get into spoilers. So if you have not seen Joker 2, this is your spoiler warning. We're going to get into it, starting with why I think Joker is so, like, why Arthur Fleck is so different in the beginning of this film than he is in the end of the first one. And I really think that's just because they have him on meds. Like, they have him medicated, so he's not as out there as he was in the film, because he was unmedicated. And then when he stops taking his pills is when things start going off the rails for him again. He starts being the Joker again. I really think that's the only thing that's different.
I mean, if that's the case, it could have been done better. And I do feel like there was a lot cut out from this film.
Oh yeah.
I also didn't like the constant, is this a beautiful mind or not-ness of it, because there's so much. They remind you in the beginning that, this guy made up a whole relationship with the girl down the hall, almost like, hey, wink, wink, you can't trust anything in this film. And then half of his interactions with Lee, Lady Gaga, you can't tell if it's real, and there is most of the time there is no reveal whether or not it is or not. She'll somehow get in the cell with him. She'll somehow be granted access that no one else would ever be granted access for. Like the guards just like her. There'll be
Yeah.
conjugal visits. There'll be makeup inside the prison, and then the next scene he won't have makeup on. And it was just like, okay, I guess
The,
I just can't take anything on its face.
he, what I was really hoping the film would do, and this doesn't weigh into my disappointment with the film, but this is what I was really thinking they were going to do, because they established in the first one that he made up that whole relationship. I was really thinking that once he revealed that he killed his mother to Lee, that I thought they were going to go the mad love route, where she actually works for Arkham, and she's like, they're using her to like learn more about him, and like she's working for the state to like testify against him. Like I thought she was going to get called up to the stand and go that route, where everything that's happening with her is real, and that's why they let her into the cell for the conjugal visit, and then like then she falls in love with him. Like I thought I thought that was going to be their take on the mad love thing. It wasn't that, but
that would have almost been better, because
yeah.
I knew from the beginning she wasn't a patient. I also knew they weren't doing the traditional Harley Quinn story, but
Yeah.
the fact that she was just some rich kid who checked herself in and then checked herself out, okay, that's cool, and they established that she was in the voluntary wing, but that doesn't mean that she could just come in and go in the cell blocks whenever she wants and screws the patients that are there by state order. That doesn't make any sense. And the guards didn't seem like they would be one to break those kind of rules anyway.
They did such a disservice to the Harley Quinn character's origin by just having it be like she like the rich kid stuff I get, but then having it be like, oh, and she also studied psychiatry. Like if you're gonna throw that in there, at least that there's no payoff to that at all, except for like I don't know why they said they had to add that one line in about her having studied psychiatry, because there's no reason for it. Because
they might as well have said she watched some psychiatry tutorial videos on TikTok and now she uses that to manipulate people. Like
she's an avid fan of Frasier and considers herself a psychiatry expert. Now that would have made the movie a little bit better for me, as if they had gone that route and done something like that. So
yeah. Instead, she's a sycophant. She's a fan. She moved in to his old building. She's she's obsessed with the grandeur. She thinks she's never done anything with her life like he has, and she's chasing that fame. And they do. I mean, they're song choices that she sings are more about her than about love. When Joker sings, it's more about her than about him. And yeah, so I got that, but then again, just the story. So the story is that they're finally bringing him to trial, and that his attorney is trying to prove that he has multiple personalities. And Harvey Dent is a teenage prosecutor who's prosecuting him. Literally, his only move in the movie is standing up, unbuttoning his coat, saying a line, buttoning his coat back up, and sitting down. He does. If you did a drinking game for how many times he unbuttons his coat in the movie, you would be dead by the end of the movie. That was his entire character. Yeah. And I was like, if that's the case, why even call him Harvey Dent? I don't get it.
Yeah.
But I was like, all right, we're getting into the courtroom scene. Let's do this, because I like courtroom scenes. Other than the Puddles cross-examination, everything else in it was just boring and not well executed, and I just kept waiting for a story to develop. And I saw the hints and like the foundations of a bigger story that they just either cut or decided not to go in that direction. it was just lacking. It was lacking.
What hints at a bigger story did you see?
But like like I and we got bits of it later when when the possible escape, but I wanted this fan base, that was kind of created at the end of the last film. Like they kept on showing the crowds and the more involvement, and I was like, is this revolution gonna overboil like it did at the end, and thinking there'd be more to that, and we got just a tiny glimpse of it at the escape, but then that was it. And also, well, I'll talk about that more at the end, but yeah, I just wanted more, and instead it really just centered around him and Harley, and never developed from that. It was just, let's go to the courthouse, let's go back to the prison, let's go to the courthouse, let's go back to the prison,
Hmm.
and then Arthur makes a decision at the end, and then it's done. And I was like, I just didn't see the development. And when I was talking to you earlier about I feel like this was a response. I feel like Todd Phillips specifically wrote him to be more of a loser in this film because too many people saw him as a protagonist in the first film. All these people saying that incels were now looking up to him, and he's the example of, let's take it to the man. Well, it's almost like Todd Phillips had to write him more pathetic in this film, to the point where just everything, even when he was off his meds, the sex scene was pathetic, how he talks to people was pathetic. He was just a loser, and they kept on shoving it in his face and in your face. And it was like Todd Phillips was like saying, if you thought he was a protagonist, he's not. He's a loser and he's a bad guy, and so we have to paint him as a loser and a pathetic and weak character, and then that makes for a boring film. And I was just bored, you know.
Yeah, it's the best way I can describe this. It is just boring. Um, you said a lot there.
Sorry, I did. I
No, you're
just
fine.
dumped a lot.
Um, yeah, it's just boring. It's the best way I can describe it. Um, were there any musical numbers that did stand out to you as like extraordinary?
um, like I can't think of songs like, oh, I really liked when they sang this song. I did like the rooftop dance scene. The set pieces reminded me of like La La Land, and
Yeah.
that was fun. But La La Land had a story, and that's the
Hmm.
difference. So there was a rooftop dance scene, and the Joker looked badass in his suit and his smoking. It was reminiscent of a shot in the first Joker where he's outside smoking in a suit and his makeup, and I was like, that's a
Yeah.
cool shot. So there's a couple scenes of that. The other was the set piece with like the walkway and the water. I thought the filmmaking was great, but at
Yeah.
some point the constant breaking into those songs was just like, cover, cover, cover. We don't have enough story to tell. Let's break into another song to distract.
Yeah.
And it wasn't distracting me enough.
And there's even like just looking at the marketing for this movie, there's things that were cut because there's a whole sequence of Joker and Harley leaving the courthouse down the stairs, like doing the kick. That's not in the movie. That's like
Yeah.
one of the main posters for the IMAX, and it's just not in the film. Um,
I read that a lot of Lady Gaga stuff was cut, and I believe it. I
yeah,
believe it.
it makes me wonder why.
Yeah, and certainly not because they wanted more Joker in this film, because it's not a Joker film. It's an Arthur Fleck film.
Yeah,
And I see that as a defense for this film a lot online, because I just had to see what other people were saying. And a lot of people were like, you don't like this film, it's because you don't understand. It's not a Joker film, it's an Arthur Fleck film. And I'm like, okay, but that doesn't make it good. Like,
yeah,
it's called The Joker,
yeah,
and we spent the whole last film watching Arthur Fleck rise to this, and then it gets ripped away, and then he graces it back again, but it's mostly during his fantasy moments, and then he just decides to leave it behind, and that character, again, that character choice didn't feel like there was enough stepping stones in the film for me to logically get to why he got there. There was
Yeah.
one moment in the cross examination with Puddles where he did feel like, oh shit, I'm trying to have fun here, and the guy that I thought was my friend, and he's trying to describe to me how much I hurt him, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's a good moment.
Yeah.
But we needed a few more of those to figure out how we got to the end point.
Exactly. Um, I had a thought and now I lost it.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Um, yeah, no, it's gone. I don't know what it
Oh
was.
no.
Um, yeah, it's completely gone now. Damn, couldn't have been that good. Uh,
Maybe it'll come back.
oh,
Maybe it'll come
I
back.
know what it was. At the end of the day, if I'm going into a movie where the film is called Joker or Joker Folie Deux, I want to see a Joker story.
Hmm.
I don't really want to see an Arthur Fleck story, and that's what this is, and that's fine. This is an interpretation of the Joker, and that's what it is. And it's not just Joker that has this problem, because Marvel is guilty of this too, especially on the Sony side of things. At a certain point, I want the studios to realize these characters work better with the dynamics of the characters that they're written with. Joker works better with Batman. Venom works better with Spider-Man.
Mm.
All the Craven works better with Spider-Man. Morbius works better with Spider-Man. Like, these characters can't be on their own for all this time. Like, these characters work better with that dynamic. That's what that's where those characters got their start. That's where the stories are the strongest. And putting them out on their own, it's not. There's only so much of it I can take as a fan. They just announced a Bane and Deathstroke movie, and I'm like, we haven't even seen Batman yet in the DCU. Like, why are we getting this? I'm just getting tired of the characters not having those stories told. We haven't seen Joker and Batman in a film together really since 2008 live
Yeah,
action.
and that was heralded as amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time a comic book movie had won an Oscar, and then Joker was the second time, and it's for the same thing, for Joker, and that says something. And I just don't. I truly and honestly believe that there was never a plan for a sequel to Joker. And then somebody put enough money on the table, they said, you cannot make a $1 billion film and us not consider a sequel. But if you're going to make a sequel, make a sequel. This was not. This was not a sequel. I do not feel that this was the same Arthur Fleck or Joker as the first movie. I just feel like they took so hard. I get subverting expectations, sure, but it was so hard of a swerve. I mean, again, I just try to think of another famous villain, and Hannibal Lecter keeps on coming up. It's not political,
Yeah.
I swear, but it's at the end of Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter is going off to catch dinner with a friend, and he's in Panama or wherever, and he's in his nice hat, and he's just strolling along, and you just know he's going to go wreak carnage somewhere. Imagine if the next Hannibal movie was just him. He lost 75 pounds. He's down in the dirt. Everybody's calling him a loser, and the whole film is just dragging him through the mud until he dies, and all because a couple people liked him in the first film, and they were afraid that society was gonna like a villain. Well, if you were afraid of that, why'd you make the first movie to begin with? Like, you wrote that first movie to make him the man against the machine.
Yeah.
Can you not trust everybody to remember that it's the Joker? Like, we know it's the Joker.
I feel like you could tell the exact same story that this film tells, but shift the focus from Joker to Harley and to be
Mm-hmm.
a stronger film. Like, if you have her be obsessed with him and enter Arkham, and everything plays out the way it does. And then you get to that courtroom where he says, Joker's not real. And then you just follow her after that. And I feel like that would be a stronger sequel to this. Because that at least feels like a continuation of the story. Like, she's inspired. Like, one of the things that bugs me is we never get to see any of the made-for-TV movie that they keep talking about. Like, I wanted to see.
Right?
I wanted to see which Hallmark actor they got to play Joker.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel like a sequel because they don't. It's so disconnected from where he was in the first film. But I think if you had focused it on Harley and made her the center point of it, and still have Arthur be in it and be like see him in Arkham and doing the musical numbers, but having the focus be on her and her connection to him, having more of that, instead of having the film be titled Joker, have it be Harley.
Well, I did read somewhere that was a version that they were playing with, that Harley would have killed him and then continued on the story. I think people would have reacted as negatively to that as they're reacting to this. Like, how are you going to kill Joker off in the sequel to the Joker?
Well,
but
let's
I could see that as logic.
Let's talk about that for a second, because the film ends with him being stabbed by an unnamed inmate in Arkham, who you see a few times in the film just staring and say, okay, he's going to come in to play later. Yep.
He's either going to kill the boyfriend or he's going to kill Joker. That was my thought the whole movie.
Yeah.
He's killing somebody in this room.
Yeah. He stabs Arthur and then starts laughing maniacally and cuts his own face. So you got another Joker. And I felt from the beginning of I felt since the first film that Arthur Fleck was not the Joker that was going to be up against Batman at any time. So I think the assumption is this guy will be that Joker, but who knows? But
why?
Yeah.
We're not going to get a sequel to this film.
No.
We're never going to see that Joker. If we didn't have a Batman in the first one, why do we need a Batman in this universe at all? You made the choice to make this about the Joker and not about the Joker and Batman. So why even waste our time with setting up someone that may or may not look like Heath Ledger's Joker because of how he cut his face? That was a dumb choice, but it was a choice that they made.
Yeah. And I don't think it is Heath Ledger's Joker. There's nothing to imply that this is the same universe as Nolan's Batman. I hope it's not, because it just...
But it's the facial scars, and, that was clearly a choice to...
Yeah.
It's the only other facial scar Joker we've ever had was the Heath Ledger one.
But it's also Elseworlds. Gotham is different enough. Alfred was different enough in the first one.
Yeah.
I still think the original idea for the first one would have been better if they had killed Bruce Wayne at the end of it, and then you could do whatever you want.
Why not commit?
Yeah.
I think that was the problem, is that they didn't have a Batman, and they didn't know where to take Joker, because I think you could have made a sequel and really cement that he is a bad guy by having him start killing other people, not just fighting the machine and 99 versus the 1%. If he just devolved into the madness and let the mob just let him go crazy and he started killing other people, you could have written him a villain. But then if you don't have a Batman, what's going to be the end all, and who's going to stop him, so they didn't go that route, but instead they went with him just totally saying that the Joker doesn't exist, and again, people are saying this is a mental health film. I don't see how he got to that point. But then when he did get to that point, Lee left the courtroom and he abandoned all of his followers. And so, he stands for nothing and he dies for nothing at the end.
Yeah.
It's just, I feel like they wanted it to be more poetic than it was. And I didn't feel it,
Yeah. Outside of Joker and Harley Quinn, we do have Harvey Dent here. That's about the only other reference to anything Batman related. You get a glimpse of a scarred up Harvey Dent after the explosion in the courtroom. But yeah, not the best take on Harvey Dent on the big screen. He's barely there.
Barely had any lines. He looked like a teenager. He was squirmy. He was annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And he had no character arc. I mean, why even do it?
Did anyone though?
That's true. It's very true. But I mean, like, if you're gonna name drop somebody, at least I mean, that felt as forced to me as you should use your real name, Robin, at the end of
Dark Knight Rises.
Dark Knight Rises. Like, I rolled my eyes so hard I had a headache at that point. I was like, just why?
There's something I wanted to tell you about when I saw this in the theaters. There's a moment where somebody says something on screen and somebody just like, ha! Like laughing at the line delivery. And I just started laughing at their reaction. And it was when Harley was like, I'm pregnant. And somebody just like started laughing. Like, of course she is. Like that. Mm-hmm. Like that's exactly where the story goes. And yeah.
And again, I wasn't sure if that was real or not. Like, I was like, I believe she's a person, but I'm not sure if she was actually, like, I just, it was unrealistic that she actually got conjugal visit, access. And so then when he brought up, what about the baby? She like dismissed it really quick to where I was like, okay, maybe that didn't happen. And she's just playing along knowing that he's psychotic. And I mean, it was just underdeveloped. And if they cut out a lot of her stuff, I'm not saying I want to see an extended cut of this, because I really don't, but I feel like there was probably more story that fleshed that out a bit. But I was so bored, I don't care.
She's good enough in this that I would watch an extended cut if it had more of her stuff in it. Because she was at least interesting in this. I haven't really seen her act in much. So this is kind of my introduction to her as an actress. So that's about the only way I would watch this again, is if there's an extended cut with more Gaga. So
yeah, I'm just disappointed, man. This felt like a cash grab, ordered down by the studios. It felt like Todd Phillips. I'm not falling into the camp. I have seen people like Todd Phillips was basically trying to say F you to the fans, and he wrote this to betray the fans. I don't think that was the case, but I do think he wrote it in response to incels that saw Joker as the protagonist. And just because there's some people online that say something doesn't mean the majority of viewers are dumb enough to walk away from Joker saying, oh, this was supposed to make me a fan of the Joker. I think most people were like, that was interesting, but he's still the Joker at the end. And we didn't need this film that makes him so pathetic and it's just, I felt no sympathy for him at the end. I was just like, oh, good. That means that the film is almost done. And then it was done. I thought it was just way too predictable. I knew as soon as that guard was walking too fast for him, I'm like, he's about to be killed. And the guards are in on it. Brendan Gleeson, good. He's always good. He's like the only other actor in here that I can really remember being like enough of a role. I thought the Puddles actor, that really felt like and Steve Coogan was in this, and that was an interesting scene. I'm glad it wasn't just a redux of the late night interview. Like, it was different, and I feel like that scene was a better scene in the film, and the courtroom scene with Puddles was a better scene in the film. Like, those were shimmering moments, but I just they were just bogged down with all of this other stuff, and at the end of the day, I don't see what the musical elements did for this film. Like, Like, I get why La La Land is a musical. It has musical elements. You know, I get why certain movies bring in musical elements if they didn't originate as musicals. But when Todd Phillips announced this was going to be a musical, and everybody 2 years ago was like, "That doesn't sound like a good idea," this is what they feared, and I don't really felt like it added anything to the film.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised. I'm equally surprised and not surprised at how many people didn't know this was a musical going into it, because I keep seeing people be like, "I didn't know it was a musical. That's why I left." Hollywood's not doing a good job at advertising their musicals lately. They didn't really make it known that this was a. Actually, Warner Brothers is guilty of this because Wonka wasn't advertised as a musical either. This wasn't advertised as a musical, and then you have Wicked coming up here in November.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really advertising that that's only part one of Wicked, so you're only getting half of the story. Like,
There was
just
some other big movie that came out recently that people didn't know was a musical. I'm trying to think of. Was that a WB film too? There's been a few of those like that people don't know. I'm trying
yeah,
to think of what that was. Um,
but
I don't know why they're trying to force musicals on us, man. But
I mean, I'm
like-
I'm all for a musical. Don't get me wrong, but if you're
Oh,
gonna,
Mean Girls. Mean Girls was a
oh, yeah.
musical. I knew that, but
yeah,
many people didn't.
it's just if you're gonna do a musical, don't be ashamed of it being a musical. Just like do it and commit to it and let people know what's
Yeah.
what. So
Yeah, I think I've said all my piece on this. I'm trying to remember what the box office for this was. It was some astronomical number,
let me take a look here.
or not the box office, the budget. Let's see, budget. I mean, Google's saying this was a $200 million film, and I don't know what the hell for. Joker, in comparison, was a $55 million film.
What one of the reviews I saw from Mark Bernardin, who hosts Fat Man Beyond with Kevin Smith, he said, somebody once said you could make a movie for $200 million, or you could ask people to pay $10 to go look at $200 million cash in person. And then yeah. after that analogy, he's like, so I saw Joker Folie do ...
Mm-hmm.
So,
I want to meet the people at Warner Brothers that thought this was a good idea, though, because after The Flash, after a lot of their poor decisions, you know, I still don't know how deep into the old regime this film was versus what's coming from James Gunn. But man, this just solidifies my thought of why did they announce James Gunn all the way back then? Because he can't help but be attached to all this, you know, like.
Well, DC Studios is not on this at all in the credits. It's just based on characters by DC. This is very much a Sony equivalent of a DC film because it does not have the DC Studios logo. It's not credited to DC Studios.
That's
this is
right.
its own
It's not.
thing.
Did the first one?
DC Studios wasn't a thing back then. So I think they're being very careful with what the first cinematic narrative film is under the DC Studios banner, because they did release that Christopher Reeve documentary under the DC Studios banner.
Okay.
So yeah.
I had one other point that I wanted to make on this that I heard somebody else talk about. It was their theory on how you're supposed to react to this, and I'm blanking on what they said. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the point of this movie was. I don't understand the studio backing a $200 million movie that I just can't imagine anybody thought that this wasn't going to piss people off. Like, this film feels like it was made to be experimental, and if you would have told me that this would have topped Megalopolis as one of the most weird film choices out there, I would have been like, that's impossible, because that film was a crazy misstep, and I called that. But at least
Yeah.
the Joker is IP, and it's coming off of one of the biggest R-rated movies of all time, $1 billion movie. Um, Anybody that responds to this with, "Oh, it's not all about the money," okay, but these days it is to some degree, and I just can't imagine somebody approving a $200 million project knowing that there's a good chance it'll flop. Like, I get
Yeah.
maybe giving them a bigger budget than the first one, but going from 55 million to 200 million, that's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. And where did it go to? How much of it went to the actors? I'm sure a bunch of it did.
Oh
Sure, a
yeah.
bunch of it went to some of the sets. But otherwise, maybe give some to a good group of writers and let them write you a good story
Yeah.
to go along with the spending.
Looks like it's on track to make $20 million this opening weekend. So
Oof.
yeah.
This will not reach a billion.
No.
I'll be surprised if it makes its money back, but
Yeah.
this was an odd misstep, and it's heartbreaking because when's the next time you think we're gonna get a Joker feature after this?
Like a standalone Joker feature.
Or to trust him to be the main protagonist, or the main antagonist of a film. Like, I just don't see it happening anytime soon. What is the deal? Look, even in the Batman, they teased the Joker, and it was like, is it that hard to just give us a normal Joker? Like,
I
is it that hard?
I don't think it is. I think part of it is people don't want to, like, Heath Ledger, I think, is still so recent in people's minds, but I'm like, that was over.
Almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's almost 20 years ago now. So it's like, we got to move on. We can't just keep doing, like, the last big screen Joker Batman we had was in the Lego Batman movie with Zach Galifianakis. It's like, let's just commit to it. Just do it. Like, let's get Willem Dafoe in white makeup and green hair paint, and like,
I mean, is it that? I mean, just like what's his face who played him in the Batman, the herpes Joker,
Yeah.
was the only thing I could think of. His face was all acidy,
Yeah.
herpesy, and I'm like, why? Well, I guess I forgot. I don't mean to purposely forget Jared Leto, but I'll take Jared Leto's Joker over this. I mean, I'll take Suicide Squad's Harley Quinn story over this. At least that was an attempt to respect the source material.
yeah. The one thing I did see online is, like, Jared Leto had a better return as the Joker in Zack Snyder's Justice League than Joaquin Phoenix had in Joker 2.
Oh my gosh. I just don't understand when we're in an age where we trust the story. Invincible. Have you seen Invincible?
I saw the
That's-
first season. Yeah.
Okay, that's based on a comic. It's very truthful to the comic. The Boys, based on a comic, very truthful to the comic. They're adapting these comic stories that are fairly new, that are written by competent people, and they're saying, hey, for the adaptation, we don't necessarily have to switch it up. We can just adapt it. We can make the comic into live action or into an animated and just follow the story because that's why they liked it. Batman character is 80 plus years old, worth of banger after banger. Sure, there were missteps, but there's a lot of great stories to pull from, and that's what the Nolans did with the Nolan trilogy. They added some of their own flair into it, but they took from great storylines in the comics and they just adapted it. And lately, WB just seems to be like, all right, name brand, character that people recognizes, oddball choice to switch it up. Let's do Hush, but let's change who Hush is. What was the recent one? Let's do dynamic duo, and I hope the rumors on that are wrong. But the rumors are that the dynamic duo movie is about orphan thieves Dick Grayson and Jason Todd growing up on the streets together, and it's like the hell, like why? Just why?
Yeah.
You know?
It'll be interesting to see where DC goes from here. This is the last major film that was done outside of the James Gunn regime. So, I'm looking
finally, right?
Yeah.
We've been waiting for this moment for years. It seems like for them to get it all out of their system. I thought the Flash or the Aquaman was going to be the last bogus one, but nope. I guess this one is just as bad. I can't imagine I would have ever said that.
I forgot about Aquaman.
Yeah, that's because it was forgettable.
Yeah. This I will at least remember, unlike Aquaman 2. But
I'll remember my disappointment for this film.
We'll have a better idea of the future of DC Studios coming up here at New York Comic Con because James Gunn will be there with the Creature Commandos. So
yeah, he's been dropping some announcements lately, and I'm like, New York Comic Con is around the corner, man. Like, do you have an agreement with San Diego Comic Con that you can only make announcements there and not at New York? Like, why not make it at New York?
It would be great if he did like a presentation at New York Comic Con and just like gave previews and announced casting for like their Batman and all that stuff. But
it's a big Comic Con. Like, you don't have to just do Preacher Commandos. Do some other stuff there,
Yeah.
Maybe show us that DC's in good hands because God, this is just,
give us a sneak peek at Superman. Like, why not? Supposedly there are posters out for Superman now, but we're gonna have to catch up on a lot of this stuff at New York Comic Con and talk about all the news from there because we're gonna be at New York Comic Con.
That's right.
So
we're going to be at New York Comic Con, and hopefully we do some recording like we did last time.
Yeah.
I have a better hotel.
Nice.
Sadly, a much more expensive hotel, and it's not as close. God, I loved that hotel. It was a shitty hotel, but it was half
so
a block
close.
away from the Javis.
Yeah.
Now I'm 3.5 blocks away.
I'm staying in Jersey this time, so I've got to take a bus over. So.
Yeah.
But
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. We've got some other things. Like, we've been in a kind of a dry spell when it comes to content for this show. But we've got New York Comic Con coming up this month. Later this month, we have, as I'm calling it, Venom Horse. Dropping from Sony, Marvel. And then we have the Penguin. Agatha All Along. A lot of fun things coming from Brilliant But Lazy. So stay tuned for our reviews of all that stuff. You can find us at New York Comic Con where we have stickers for the podcast. So come find us.
Oh, snap, stickers.
Yeah. If I remember to pack them. But yeah. Until then, for Brilliant But Lazy, I'm Alan.
I'm Josh.
In the words of Dr. Fraser Crane, wishing you good mental health.